Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soul Seekers Podcast, where we believe that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure as we share our mission of mentorship is conservation. To learn more about everything we do, check out our show on Carbon TV or go to soulseekersnation.com. Freedom on, everybody, and stay soulful. Do you want to become a better shooter, reduce flinch, protect your ears, and just overall enjoy shooting your gun that much more? Then there's no better way to do that than by adding a suppressor to the end of your barrel. Be sure to check out Huxwrx Safety Co, as they are a leader in the suppressor world with their OSS Flow-Through Technology, virtually eliminating blowback and toxic gas that can affect weapon system performance and shooter health. To find out more about Huxwrx, go to huxwrx.com. That's huxwrx.com, and go get yourself a suppressor for your upcoming hunts. This podcast is also proudly brought to you by OnX Hunt. When I first got into hunting, I kept hearing all about public land and different access and how to find different locations to hunt. I was like, well, how are people even identifying all this stuff? Well, sure enough, I came across the number one hunting GPS app, and that is OnX Hunt. If you guys want to get better at hunting and go deeper into your scouting, OnX Hunt is the number one GPS app for that. Join the millions of hunters who trust OnX Hunt to find more game, discover new access, and hunt smarter. It was a game changer for me, and I know it's going to be a game changer for you if you've never used it. If you have used it, you know the power that it holds. Guys, I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you want to know more about OnX, go to onxmaps.com/hunt. and check out their app. Be blessed, freedom on, and stay soulful. All right, guys, if you're in the market for optics, I want you to go check out blackdiamondoptics.com. Black Diamond Optics offers world-class sporting and tactical optics, including thermals, all at wholesale pricing, direct to consumer. They are going to be partnering up with us for 2023, and I want to start pointing you over towards their direction. Check out Black Diamond Optics. If you've got any questions about it, shoot us a message. Love to hear from you. Be blessed, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soul Seekers Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack. And for those listeners out there who have been following along with the podcast, back to the origin of when it used to be called the Soulful Hunter, we had a guest on back in the spring of 2020 before a spring bear hunt that I had a guest on. We talked about just life and hunting and being a man and growing up and all this and the art of masculinity. Well, that guest, Johnny Elsasser, is an absolute savage warrior, and he's somebody who I've wanted to bring back on the podcast for some time, specifically because this podcast is not just about hunting. It's called Soul Seekers. We are seeking after souls, the souls of others, the souls of the animals that we hunt, but also we seek after our own soul to grow, to become better, because at the end of the day, either we are getting better or we're getting worse. And so it's a choice that we get to make. Well, today's episode is dedicated to the designing the man within, and we are going to be talking all about courage, fear, and what it means to be a man. Without further ado, and humbled to have him on as a guest, my man, my friend, my brother, Johnny Elsasser is here to join us, the host of the Art of Masculinity Podcast, and now the author of the book, Design the Man Within. We're going to dive into that today, and this episode is going to be one that you're definitely going to want to take notes on. So thank you so much for tuning in. Johnny, my brother, what's happening?
I love you, brother. That's such a beautiful intro. So good, man. I feel like I could just end my evening right there. Like, that's perfect. That just made me feel so good, dude. And I forgot that was before you got that black bear, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Wow, that was that long ago.
Dude, that was that long. That was a whole pandemic ago.
Oh my God. I feel like it was just yesterday. I was shooting you a text message because you sent me over the picture, and I was like, bro, congrats, man. Like, amazing. Cause that was the one thing you wanted to get, man.
That bear made it on the cover of Bear Hunting Magazine.
That's amazing, bro. Wow. I can't believe it's been that long.
I know. Dude, time flies, man. Time flies. But I'll tell you, we're due for another sit down. This is phenomenal.
For sure.
On that podcast was very it was a hallmark episode for me because I was just getting out of my personal growth development leadership program that I was doing in California, stepping into this role of becoming who I believe I am and know I am, affirmations, manifestation, ownership, I ams. I am a
Yeah.
powerful, inspiring, loving leader. And I was on this, man, I don't want to say camp high, because it's just a matter of keeping it going and habit. It's just a habit of the way you live, how you speak, how you talk, how you
Yeah.
show up. And here I was like, dude, I'm thinking about this bear hunt. I'm choosing it. I know I'm going to draw this tag. I know I'm going to kill this animal. I know exactly how it's going to show up. And you said, think it, or dream it, think it, envision it, and make it happen. And I was like, yes. And then it did exactly how I expected, except I chose not to shoot it with a bow. I shot it with a rifle.
Hey, man, you still got it.
Dude, but I tell you, man, like that episode, like I've recorded, when this episode releases, we're over 200 episodes into this podcast, but that is one
Amazing.
that stands out as like a hallmark episode for me. So I'm glad to get you back here, because it's time to get that engine running, right?
I love that, bro.
Let
Every episode with you is a hallmark for me, because I just love your energy. I mean, you and Luke are like brothers, like distant brothers to me, that we just took a while to meet up in this lifetime, but literally just love you guys, man. So it's always fun being on the show with you and jamming out.
well, I appreciate that. I never met a Johnny who wasn't a good guy. So
Likewise.
all right, brother. So catch us up on what life has been for you since 2020, since that last episode that we did together. You're hosting the Art of Masculinity. You started kicking off. I think this was actually before you started doing your wild man experiences.
That
And
would have been, I think, it would have been, I think it was right before my first one, because I did September was my first Wildman of that year, 2020. Yeah.
yeah. So tell us, what is the Art of Masculinity? What have you been doing? Like,
Yeah.
drop a bomb on us right now.
I love it, bro. I've just been really diving into the men's space, making sure that I am educating myself and doing the work on myself so I can support men out there and do it in an authentic way. That's been like my biggest goal. And then, in between then, yeah, I've been doing the show. We had a ton of great guests on. We got to have you back on there as well, because it's always fun to jam out with you. But had a lot of good guests on. We're up to now about 350 some odd episodes in the books, and that's been a blast. And we're just continuing to roll with the podcast, and it's just been a lot of fun, man. As you know, podcasting's like it starts out laborious, and then if you have the perseverance to get through it, it's fucking epic. Like, it's just amazing. It's so much fun, but you got to have that perseverance to get through the laborious, struggling times. But been cranking that out, brother. The coaching's been going great. Been continuing getting like one-on-one guys to come. Started to create a couple of different programs. Like, I created the Elite Man community to really start to funnel in guys. Really low cost. It's really just to get them in there so they have some skin in the game. But overall, it's like a huge delivery for me, and I love doing it. A lot of content for it, and that's been a lot of fun to create that. And then now it's just driving traffic in there. It's really been getting strategic on the entrepreneurship front, to be honest. And then the Wildman experience that has been gaining a lot of traction. You and I were chatting, I'm not doing that this year because the fact that I'm co-hosting an event with a friend of mine out in Norway. It's going to be a Viking event, and that's pretty massive. And then we have the book that is coming out here on May 16th, and I've been putting that together. So a lot of that took up my time this year. So it's been like one step in front of the other. As you know, it's kind of like you can't look at the end game and like go for it. You have to know that you have an idea of the end game, and then just look in front of you and just take one day at a time, man. And that's basically how I'm doing it.
Absolutely. I was gonna say, for like the analogy, I love analogies. They're a beautiful thing. The idea of like when you run long distance races, if
Yeah.
you're constantly looking at the finish line or like way out there, you're probably going to sprain your ankle or hurt yourself because you're not watching where you're stepping. And you got to make sure, like, pick your eyes up every now and then, make sure you're there. But understanding where you're stepping. My mother, shout out to my mom. She always said, inch by inch is a cinch. Mile by mile may take a while, but inch by inch is a cinch.
I love that. It's also, you miss the experience when you do that. Like, I've spent times in my life, and this is one of the things I've been working on this year too, is I'm getting out to be a keynote speaker. So I've been working on a couple keynote speeches, and one of them, I've come to learn that, like, there's times in my life when things weren't easy, right? Like, I was in special operations, or when I was doing protection. A lot of time I was away from friends and family, and I just had the brothers around me, but you didn't really have a lot of an ability to, like, really live life. And so I'd sit there just longing for, like, when it was going to be done. So I'm looking at the end game of that, period in my life. And I realized that I probably missed a lot of moments in there. I should have taken more time to revere and value. And I think for life in general, like, you just miss the experience. You miss your kids growing up. You miss your relationship with your partner. You miss, like, you miss your life in front of you. And then all of a sudden you get to that point and you look back and you're like, where did it all go?
Yep.
And that actually terrifies me now. So I try to just live every day very consciously, because I'm like, that terrifies me. I don't want to get to the end and be like, I missed it.
I was just talking to my wife this last Friday. I planned with my children. I surprised them. We have an outdoor fireplace connected to our house. Moved to Texas, and just a beautiful. It creates more of another room to the house that's usable space. And I planned we're outdoor movie night and s'mores. And
I love that.
and I sat there with my wife while the kids were just enjoying their dinner and s'mores and watching this movie outside. And what's up, Soul Seekers Nation? Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I really appreciate it. As a reward, I have some discount codes for you to use if you are in the market for a brand new hunting pack. Go check out initialascent.com and Initial Ascent packs. They are made in America. Their one-piece carbon frame is an absolute game changer. We run their packs. We love them. And you can save 5% at checkout by using the code SOULSEEKERS. That's all one word. Also, for those of you who are archery hunters and you are tired of shooting at dots on a target, check out deadnutsoutdoors.com for their lifelike 2D archery targets. You can save 20% on all of their products by using the code SOULSEEKERS at checkout. Once again, the code is SOULSEEKERS, all one word. Go check out initialascent.com and Dead Nuts Outdoors. Enjoy the podcast. I leaned over to my wife and I said, can you believe it? We're here. We're at that point in our life where when we were younger, we say, oh, I can't wait to be married, and have a family, and to then just be able to be enjoying it. And to be able to be like, we're in this, regardless of how loud it gets or how rowdy it gets or things break and people cry and there's fights and whatever. It's like, is this not what we wanted? Do we not always get what we want ultimately? And so I'm really excited to dive into this. There's so much, man. See, you're getting my juices flowing right now, brother. Because
that's what it's about, bro.
I still don't realize like how much this is what I love to talk about. This is, and I haven't even told you what I'm doing for a job right now. And that's going to tie in tremendous to our topic tonight.
I'm excited. A little teaser.
Oh, yeah. Real quick, for the people who haven't listened to our previous episode or know much about you, can you give a little history?
Yeah. So I was former Special Operations Army Ranger at a 2nd Ranger Battalion, did 4 combat tours between Iraq and Afghanistan. Spent another 5 years with a private company protecting the U.S. ambassador to Iraq out of Baghdad. So spent about 10 years in and out of the Middle East, and then did a job for the federal government for about another 10 years working for the State Department. And that's really what's led me to this point. I had a failed marriage and a lot of struggle after coming out of being in the Middle East for a long time. And that was really more because I lost my purpose in life. And so from there, I had to come to some terms with, that the way I was living as a man wasn't really allowing me to be a good man in life and to really have a good and happy, enjoyable life. So, that's when I went down my journey for self-development and really started to try to figure out like where those shadows were and confront them and start to rip out some of the pieces of who I was that I didn't like and started to put in the pieces that were going to help me be who I am today. And that's still constant work, but that helped me to start persevering. I did bodybuilding for a little bit after that to give myself a little sense of purpose. That was really fun and cool. And then from there, created the podcast. Man, I was just like needed to really reach out to guys and meet them where they were at and try to impact them. So my wife at the time, she was my friend, and she was like, yeah, you need to use your background, and hopefully guys will give you 5 minutes of their day, and hopefully you can change their lives in those 5 minutes. And I said, challenge accepted.
Right.
And I'm too dumb to stop. So here we are, 350 some odd episodes later on the podcast, and 5 or 6 years later down the road in self-development and coaching and everything. And I just don't know any better. So I put my mind to it, and I'm stubbornly stupid a lot of the times.
Brother, I'll tell you, man, so often in life, people want to be inspired. People want. I was searching the internet today because I'm in a crossroads of my life right now. I wouldn't say midlife crisis because I feel like that kind of hit with the pandemic, where like I haven't wanted to be a school teacher for a long time, like a very long time. I've applied to so many jobs, haven't really gotten a whole lot of sniffs. And ultimately it's like, okay, well, now that I have wife and kids and we moved to Texas, which I'm very thankful for that we got down here, and realizing we don't have much of a community of support, I need to make sure I'm there for my children and all that. And being a school teacher provides the hours to then be there for my children.
Yeah.
And so the crossroads I'm talking about is like, I'm enjoying the moment with my kids. And also at the same time, I know that I've let myself go. I'm not drawing a hard line in the sand and living a life of true purpose the way I know I was back in 2020. And I think a lot of that has to go based off of goals. The whole, what do you want? Well, what do I want? I want to actually have presence with my family. I used to be always, yeah, I'm here, but I'm thinking about the next adventure or the next year, or that, I can't wait till my kids are older till they can do this, rather than being like, yeah, but they can do it. They can do this now. And so there's a little bit of a depression that I'm battling personally in moving to a place where I don't know anyone, and completely uprooting my family to everything I've ever known and being like, okay, here we go. We're going for it.
Yeah.
And because it's an and life, not an or life or a but life. And how awesome is it that we get to do this? Like, yeah, I have children that are going to grow up being Texans, not like my youngest son is not going to really know the concept of Washington. He's going to grow up saying, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, y'all, and, being a cowboy.
Yeah. I love that, man. And it's almost like it to some extent, it's like that modern day explorer, right? Like while the city is there and it's founded, like you still have to find your own way there. And you guys definitely took on a life that didn't carry a lot of support for you because of the fact that you don't have any infrastructure there. But neither did any of the explorers when they got anywhere. So like, it's like you get to make that, you get to create that and cultivate it in accordance with how you guys desire to live down there, how you desire to raise your kids, and then bring people into your life that fit that mold, So it's a really cool time for you if we look at it in the sense of like, bro, you're very confident in who you are. You're an incredibly capable human, and there's nothing that you're going to fail at. So just enjoy it because you're going to make it work, right? Like that's what we always have to remember.
Yeah. Yeah. That, and we get to lean into our spouse. Like I get to really lean into my wife right now because, because there is no escape. There's no like, I'm going to go hang out with the buddies. I'll see you later. Like, no, it's you and me. And I really like my wife. I love
Yeah,
her
that's
and I like her. And
yeah.
that's a powerful
Well,
statement.
my wife and I, we moved from the DC area down here to Charleston, South Carolina, and we've been here on our own. We have zero family here. We have zero friends. We've actually just made like our first like 3 friends here in the area like recently. We've lived here for like over 2 years. So like yeah, I'm like yeah,
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. As a thank you, I got more discount codes for all of you. If you are in the market for anything in regards to calls, whether it's elk calls, turkey calls, deer or predator calls, you can save 15% on all Rocky Mountain hunting calls by using the code SOULSEEKERS. That's all one word. And if you're in the market for hard side hydration, a better way to hydrate, go check out hardsidehydration.com. Use the code SOULSEEKERS10 to save 10%. And we also have a discount at Graxaw.com. That is, Graxaw is the leader in ultralight game bags and other backcountry gear. Light, fast, and efficient is their motto. Use the code SOULSEEKERS, all one word, to save 10% at checkout.
we love it. We love each other. We like each other. We love hanging out together. And it doesn't bother us, but we also desired to just make our own way and figure out what that looked like. We weren't going to do it like 100%. We have a huge community in Austin. We easily could have moved to Austin. We didn't want to. We had enough money to buy a house in Austin. This was a few years ago, so it was even before all the pricing got crazy, and we still didn't want to move to Austin. And it's not saying anything bad about that. It's just saying that we desired a path on our own, and we're like, cool, Charleston seems dope.
Yeah.
And we don't have shit here, but we'll make it work.
It's really interesting hearing what we're talking about, and I don't believe in coincidences. Everything happens with purpose and that in mind. The guest that I had on last week on the podcast that I just released on Monday, his name's Paul Ronto. He is the vertical marketing manager at Onyx. Onyx is one of our sponsors of this podcast, but he also is the founder and owner of a company called Type 3 Life. And the whole thing is built around how men need community to thrive.
Yes, we do.
Because we're not meant to be lone wolves, lone rangers. And as much as this like grit and courage and challenge is like, there's like a fantasy about it, that life really sucks because I really love support. I really love my friendships and the people that I can count on in my life. So it's really interesting that is tying into this. And then we're going to be talking about your book and designing the man within. And we're going to be covering, I've been desiring in my own heart to have an episode specifically about courage. And when you talk about courage, the duality of courage is fear and overcoming that. So, Let's talk a little bit about this real quick. So, the art of masculinity. How do you define masculinity?
This is a tricky one because I don't I think if you look at the definition of masculinity, it's super ambiguous. It's basically,
which doesn't that defeat the point of masculine, is that it's ambiguous?
It's super ambiguous, which is fascinating to me. But I think in all honesty, the definition being ambiguous kind of assists us in actually evolving as men. And the reason I say that is because the fact that, if we look back at like the ancestral ways of being a man, right? We have to look back at like, okay, what was expected of men? And that made them masculine, right? Like that literally embodied masculine. And what was that? It was protection. It was protection and providing, right? So you're looking at two main things, really, and then leadership was pretty much another one that they were trusted to be leaders. I would say that those were probably the 3 ancestral things that made men, that they were looked at to embody no matter what tribe you were in. Well, then I looked at it and I said, well, what was the common theme in those ancestral ways? The common theme was there was one environment, and that single environment was global. And that one environment was survival because they had to survive as tribes. And so the expectation became extremely consistent globally. But what happened when we created civilization? We took those things out of the fold. you don't have to provide anymore. You can go to the store. You're providing now is you making enough money that you can go to the market and go buy stuff. Your protection now is outsourced to law enforcement. You don't even have to be a protector to be a man in the world today. So when you look at all those things, you're like, okay, so I still believe those make strong men, and I still believe men should do that. That's my personal opinion. But at the end of the day, when civilization came in and we created these constructs, it allowed us to have additional pieces to masculinity. I think there's some masculine traits out there that we need to include in that fold. And then every man can take those pieces that he believes resonate with him internally. And as long as he embodies those authentically, he feels connected to being that man, and he still shows up as a man in society.
Yeah.
But for us to say there's only like 3 ways to be a man becomes very difficult when you look at actually the progression and you look at actually the sociology behind masculinity and how we've evolved in society. Because evolution, as far as like being able to survive within our environments, has been something we always had to carry. Why wouldn't it be the same as men now, right? Like, so that's for me, when you talk about like the definition, it's hard for me to paint one perfectly. It's easier for me to say, like, here's what I've seen if we look at the history, and I believe that there's a set of rules for men or a set of traits for men. I haven't codified those yet. I want to go back and actually do that so I could give a better answer. But once you codify those, then it's like, okay, Johnny Mac is authentic with like these 3 traits, even though there's like 10, right? Now, you're embodying masculine traits and you're still presenting as a man in this world. It just may not be the same 3 traits that I, as Johnny Elsasser, embody and appreciate and value, right? And so that's where I think it ends up having a line drawn.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Very interesting. And for all the listeners who are new to this podcast, this is the whole idea, is that there's this transformation that takes place through primal adventure of the podcast, what we always talk about, how it ties into hunting. Hunting, it plays that provider life role, which then ties into the masculinity role. And that is now us returning back because we've gone so civilized, so far removed from what it means to be a man, what it means to be a provider, that we've lost our way. And now we get to return back to that. And through that, plant roots and then grow and blossom. And so this is why you are such a perfect guest for this podcast and this episode. That's a really, really fascinating way. Real quick, let's talk about this, because this is something I've never talked about on this podcast before. And I think people actually they might get turned off by it, but they need to understand it, right?
Yeah.
Right. You may not want to touch a stove because you'll get burnt, but you need to understand that if you touch it, you'll get burnt. Like the concepts of just because it's there doesn't mean you can't look at it or understand it or, apply the knowledge. The ultimate masculine and the ultimate feminine. And do you cover that a lot on your podcast, but what is that in regards to, showing up in the world and designing the man within?
Well, there's a balance, man. Like, you can't be a great husband, and I challenge anybody. I'll challenge them to their face. You can't be a great husband if you can't dip into the feminine, because you can't understand what they need in certain aspects of their lives and what they need in certain times. And without that understanding of that balance of feminine within you, then you're not going to be able to give them actually what they need. And ultimately, then, because you didn't have the feminine, you actually failed as a man, right? Like, so ultimately the circle of that is that you're failing in the place that you believe you're not failing because you're being a man. So it's a really interesting conversation, but we all have it. We all have this tendency to float through the masculine energy and the feminine energy, and it doesn't matter. Women have this as well. The thing that differs from us is that the men, when we instinctually go back to our primal, or when we go back to our basics, it's always the masculine, right? Because we inherently embody that. That's what consumes us. That's what we've evolved with it. And then the same thing with women. They default back to that feminine. That's natural for them. It's comfortable for them. That's where they want to be. That's where they're in their best attributes. Same thing with men, right? So like this is the dynamic, but we have the tendency to have flow into those energies so that we can also remain balanced, because we can't always be in this hyper, like for instance, if we say protection, let's just use protection for instance. That is by definition what makes a man, right? Protection. Like you better be protection. Trust me, guys. I've done this for 10 years, being spec ops and doing protection for the U.S. ambassador. When you're hyper vigilant all the time and there's nothing that you ever do except be vigilant for security's sake and protection's sake, your adrenals drop. Like you are constantly under a sympathetic nervous state, and everything around in your life becomes secondary to that one piece. If you're constantly in that state, you're going to drain yourself and you're going to end up being absolutely miserable. But if you allow yourself to say that's one part of me and there's certain instances where I want to be that and there's certain instances where I don't, then you allow yourself fluidity. And that's what that is, that masculine and feminine. The feminine's fluidity. That's how you be a good father, because your kids, guess what? Shocker, they need nurturing. Guess what's associated with feminine? Nurturing, not with masculine. So you've got to dip into that side of feminine to be a good father, because they don't need you to slap them around all the time and yell at them. They need you to actually tell them you love them and give them support and a hug. Like they need those things.
Yeah.
And so that feminine balance, if we're not embracing that as men, is not allowing us to be balanced in our lives as men. And the same thing with feminine. If they're not leveraging their masculine to help balance them and offset, especially women who are single out there, if you're not allowing yourself to kind of present that masculine flavor to your life, you're going to be chaotic in like to one extreme, and you're not going to have any like semblance of organization and balance to your own life. So it's both. We can't, like, it's not just saying men or women, but we got to both have that balance. I
Right.
hope that answers. Did that
No,
kind of address it?
Yeah, totally. And I want to add on to that and build onto that
Yeah.
is so the masculine energy, what it means to be a masculine, just masculine in general, is giving, is giving. We give time, we give energy, we give effort, we give. The feminine is the receiving.
Yeah.
The hug, right? We open up and say, here, come into this. And for us to be the ultimate duality and to walk that balance of the yin and yang, the masculine and the feminine together, means for us to also, like you said, as a parent to a child, draw a hard line and be like, hey, stand firm, but great job, and I love you, and it's okay,
Yeah.
and all that. With that being said, what you said when you're running spec ops and that whole sympathetic nervous system where you're like, if defense is the only thing I'm ever thinking about, everything else goes secondary, and you're only living in that masculine energy, then that means you're also not receiving, because you're constantly giving. And if you're only giving and you're not receiving, you're going to run empty. And that
Oh
is
yeah.
extremely important to our lives, to constantly make sure we fill up our own cup so that we can then live our true self and continue to give. And
Yeah.
man, it's fascinating, dude. I hated psychology in college. It was an 8 a.m. course on my freshman year, in the fall at college, Psychology 101, and I hated it. Now,
Yeah.
the human psyche is incredible to like
Mm.
really dive into.
It is, but I have reservations. Like I read a lot of books, especially because of the fact that it's part of for me to continue education in the men's space. Like I focus a lot on Carl Jung and a lot of his work, because most of the men's stuff is based around he's kind of the first one to really dive into the psychology of men. Um, but it's a lot of it's opinion based too. Like you think about it and you're like, but bro, you're interpreting what other people are thinking and feeling.
Yeah.
How correct can that actually really be all the time, right? And so like I look at psychology, and it's really funny that we've created a profession around it. And you're like, really, at the essence of psychology though is assumption. It's assumption of what other people are thinking and feeling. That's literally the basis of psychology. And you're like, huh, all right, well, I'm not necessarily in agreement now at how accurate that always is. Now, do I think, obviously I educate myself on it, and I think they've hit the nail on the head on quite a few things, but that's really the honest truth, is like you're like basically just doing interpretation and assumption and saying that's it.
Well, and this is the whole idea of nihilism, right? In the end, if it's all opinion, then none of it matters, right? Because opinions are whatever, perspective comes with experiences, and
Yeah.
then you have power behind it.
Yeah.
Ultimate nihilism is like that. None of it matters. You don't matter. I don't matter. What we say and how we are and how we operate, none of it matters, because if we died at this moment, died today, the world just continues on, you know.
Mm.
And so, legacy, which is one of the pillars of this podcast, is something that I believe that legacy is not talked about in life as much as I believe it needs to be.
Like somebody, like an individual's legacy.
Yeah, leaving your mark.
Yeah.
I talked about on this last podcast, the movie Garden State. Did you ever see it?
Yeah, it's actually a phenomenal movie. I used to love Zach Braff, dude. He was amazing
Yes.
in Scrubs.
So I quoted this movie on the podcast last week, but the whole the hallmark of the movie is I'm doing something now that has never been done before at this exact time in this exact place. I'm making history.
Yeah.
And that's legacy, right? Like you make your history every single day, whatever it is that is going to motivate you to be the best that you can, rather than just being a boat without a rudder and letting the water just take you wherever. It's like, that might be fun for a little bit, but at some point, what do you want?
Well, it's also like, what is the life you get to live if you are for good reasons trying to leave a lasting legacy? Like, right? Like you look at Achilles, right? The old story of Achilles. He had the choice to live his days out and not die as he did in the Trojan War, or he could fight in the Trojan War and his name would be spoken through the annals of time.
Yeah.
And he chose, because as a warrior, and his legacy was what meant a lot to him. He was like, well, I want to be talked about till the end of days. And so he went into the war, the Trojan War, and famously died in the Achilles heel shot from Paris. Right. So like, it's one of those things. If we're looking at legacy in a positive way, like if you're looking at like, I want to leave a legacy so it shines a light for those in the future, and it's actually a positive, lasting effect that I'm trying to have. So whether that be your kids, whether that be your grandkids, whether that be a community of people, whatever it is, like that's great. And then you can also see the double-edged sword where someone's got such a hell-bent idea on legacy with power and money. And you look at people like, Rockefeller,
and ego
or you
comes
look at
in.
ego comes in, or you look at somebody like Bill Gates, right? Like things like that, where ego's in there and their legacy is really insidious, to be honest, but they'll have a legacy for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. The movie Troy, love it. And to this day, I forget where he's training Achilles. Brad Pitt's training with Odysseus's nephew or younger.
Oh no, it's his cousin Patroclus. Is that who you're talking about?
There
when he's
you
training
go.
Patroclus.
I think it was that when they're training, and Patroclus is like, how is it that you're so brave and you just always do this? And he turns to him and is like, that's why your name will never be remembered. And here I am forgetting his name in this moment. So, okay, so let's shift gears here, because this could be a whole series by itself, and which is probably,
I know, we're just going all over the place. People are like, what are these two talking about?
By the way, you can drop the F-bomb if you want to. I don't believe in censorship at all, and so regardless,
it's so funny because I always forget to ask when I get on podcasts, but me being former military and stuff, it's like just cursing like comes out, and I try to do better to not do it as much. But yeah, sometimes I like forget to ask, and then I'll just drop them, and I'm like, oh, I hope they can have cussing on their show.
Do you ever see the movie Gettysburg? Like the old, like
Yeah,
double, yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
the old Irish guy that was like, that man knew more fine cuss words than I had known. I always think about that when I hear cussing. Like there's an art to it, right? The art of
Yeah.
cussing. Okay.
It's funny too. Real quick, a backstory here. I was on a dude's podcast recently, really great podcast, awesome individual, and he was listening to some of my stuff to kind of prepare for the show. And his daughter was in the car, and she's like 13 or whatever. He doesn't like censor what she hears because he's like, "Hey, you're gonna hear it anyways." And so he's playing my stuff, and like I cuss in there, and she goes, "Dad, he cusses a lot." And he goes, "Yeah, he does." And she goes, "He cusses really well." And I was like, so he tells me this, and I was like, oh, I'm going to take that's a huge compliment
That
coming
is,
from a 13-year-old girl that I cuss really well. I'm great. Like,
dude,
this is good.
that there's an art to it, man. You know,
Yeah.
when you put the emphasis on the wrong syllable, it really makes a difference.
So good.
Dude,
So good.
I love this. Okay, so let's shift gears into this idea of the duality of courage and fear, and because that is a hallmark trait of man, right? I was always raised, my father instilled in me because he was also my high school football coach. So, I look at him more as like this coach figure than my father figure, and he had this thing, and he was always like, courage is the first known trait of man. Courage is the first known trait of man. If you want to be a man, you need to be courageous. And so I have this like hammered in my head. So I'm gonna talk about this right here, and then I'll give me some dialogue. Give me your perspective on this, because
100%. Just making some notes.
you have been put into situations where you need to be courageous, and
Yeah.
it's a muscle that you have to train. You have to flex. You have to like, which I'll talk about that because I have fear in me. I also, my dad also said it only takes one punch to break your nose, which with that being said is like, I'm extremely calculated on what risk I'm willing to actually step out into. Because it's like, okay, is the risk worth the reward? I can be all masculine and, why did you do that? Blah, 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 blah. But then am I willing to truly engage in that versus I rather mentally dominate someone than physically dominate someone concept. So this is a huge topic within itself. So I'm going to read something real quick to you. And this is I was on a run, and I love to listen to nothing. I love to listen to my thoughts in nature. Sometimes I'll put in earbuds and I'll listen to music. And one of the songs that I listened to the other day is about courage. It says, "We were made to be courageous. We were made to be courageous. So where are you, men of courage? You were made for so much more. This is our resolution." And for those of you, like, the root of the word resolution is resolute, means to stand strong, to be firm in an idea, in a concept. So this is our resolution, our answer to the call. We will love our wives and children. We refuse to let them fall. We will reignite the passion that we buried deep inside. May the watchers become warriors. Let the men of God arise. And when I heard that line, may the watchers become warriors, I was like, okay, become. Become means transform. We transform from this sideline, fearful individual to this, I got this. I vote for myself. I believe in myself. I can do this. The little engine that could, that I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. I know I can. I know I can. I can. I can. I can. I am. I am. Let's go. And you're leading the charge, right?
Mm-hmm.
All men die, but not all men truly live, as the great William Wallace said.
Yeah.
As far as we know from the movie Braveheart.
As Mel Gibson says.
Yeah, as Mel Gibson says. So here we are in the Bible. I like to quote the Bible a lot. The Bible says to seek justice, which is a manly trait, right? Like, for us to seek justice means that we need to be courageous in fear. Like, no, that's not right. Standing up against the bully. No, don't do that. Be
Yeah.
better than that. Seek justice. Where's the justice in this world of humanity that's just getting raped and pillaged by our governments, by society, by taxes? It was a 3% tax that caused the American Revolution, right? We're getting taxed at like 40% right now. Like, come
Yeah.
on. So seeking justice, but loving mercy. I think that right there is the masculine and the feminine. Loving the mercy. And then walk humbling with your God. So when we're talking about courage, when we're talking about this, what comes to your mind right now? Because all this is really designing the man that you want to be, the man within.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
speaks to you in that?
It's for me, and we kind of talked about this a little before, but without fear, you can't have courage because there's nothing to be courageous against. So when we look into the eyes of fear, it's actually one of the most powerful things. It's kind of like, why does anybody want a legacy? Right? Why does anybody want a life in general? Because the fact that death looms. And if death didn't loom, there'd be no need for a legacy. There'd be no need to have this great life. And it's the same thing with courage. If fear didn't exist, you would have no reason for it. And so, for me, when I hear that and how we walk with courage, is that courage can't be it can't be opened or exposed until we're confident in who we are as men or individuals, because that allows you to say, wait, I have principles, I have morals and ethics that do need to be defended. And therefore, that is actually also a provocation to have courage, because there's nothing else that you can do, because your body, every instinct in you is like, no, I got to stand up for this, or I have to represent this, or I need to be a light for other people. So I have to step forward like this. And all of that comes from us knowing who we are individually. When you embody that and you embody that relationship with yourself, then courage comes out naturally, because you're not afraid to stand up for those things in which you believe in, or which you represent, or which need to be upheld. You'll never falter in that. But when we lack that confidence, which majority of the world does today, when they lack that confidence, or I can say at least the American population, when they lack that confidence, there's no ability to be courageous. There's no identifiable structure within you to even hold courageousness up. You don't have that ability. You're incapable of it. And I think that's where it's like, that's to me is what comes up, is that individually you got to know what you stand for. You've got to know who you are. You've got to know what your foundation is. And when you understand that, that's when courage can come out.
Interesting. The great Abraham Lincoln said, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
We saw that during the pandemic. I mean, how many people didn't stand for anything, right?
Right.
We saw how many people got manipulated. And then who didn't get manipulated? There's the people who stood for something.
It's so interesting, like, and I don't know if my listeners know this or not, but I refuse to take the jab. And I was forced by my job to take the jab or get fired. And I was willing to lay down my life as far as what I knew and say, no, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
And that ultimately is like one of the big pushes of why we came to Texas, because at that point I was ready to sell my house and live off the profit and figure out life during that time, and
Yeah.
it kind of got the spark going. But yeah, so that is really interesting, is like, identifying our foundation, because a foundation is, if we don't have it, we're going to fall over in any storm.
Well, that's like, when I talk about this, and this is what I try to help men build. This is kind of like even my whole premise and foundation, for lack of a better term, for my business, is when I was in special operations, we weren't great because the fact that we were just highly skilled people or super talented. You know why we were great? Was because every day I and all my freaking squad members and every ranger out there was training on the fundamentals. We were training on the fundamentals of urban warfare. We were training on the fundamentals of being teams. We were training on the fundamentals of what it was to even be a ranger. And in that was, guess what? If it got boring because you were doing the same thing over and over, you knew you were doing something right, because that was instilling a foundation that when the whole world went to shit around you, when the bombs were going off, the bullets were coming, you went down to that lowest level of training, which was so high that you outperformed everybody coming after you, and you still succeeded in the mission. And it's the same thing in life. Like, if you do not train on a strong foundation and you don't understand where your foundation is or what it's even about, then absolutely, as soon as the next psychological operation comes into our country, which they're already talking about for like 2025, they're already planning these things. When that comes in, guess what? You're going to be on the same boat you were just on. You're going to be manipulated. You're not going to critically think, and you're not going to question, and you're not going to be courageous to stand up in the face of the collective, what is perceived as the collective narrative. You won't stand up against that. And that is where I take what I've learned as, and thank God, I was young when I went into Ranger Battalion, because it gave me such a strong foundation in a lot of morals and principles that I hold to this day, that no, I'm not going to be bullied, and I don't give a shit who you are. I will stand up, and I will die on my own hill. I will always do that. And that's something, whether for good or bad, like, I will die on my hills, on specific ones that I hold dear to me. And the courage to stand up in that is what's been instilled in me for a long time. But all that's built at such a foundational level that it doesn't matter what shitstorm come. It doesn't matter if someone threatens my job. It doesn't matter what happens. Like, just like you, I'm going to stand up. Yeah. I will do it.
And, the interesting thing is it doesn't go away. The mass collective of society has a short-term memory. They don't remember. And so, what feels like a long time ago when the pandemic ended, for maybe the majority, like moving to Texas, where it ended a long time ago, and I come down here like, well, why'd you move to Texas? Well, let me tell you, because it was a hallmark moment in my life for me to uproot my family and everything that I know and move 2,000 miles away. I love this idea that you're saying training the fundamentals of your life, of your life, not the life that someone else says you should. We don't should on people. You train the fundamentals of your life, identifying your foundation, what you stand for, what it is that you want. What do you want?
Yeah.
What do you want? Dude, that is a question that I got asked one time in a leadership training, and it's weird that it's so hard to answer.
Well, it's so, you get it asked. I know the type of training you were in, and you get it asked a million times, and you get it asked a million times because the fact is, like, the first thing you got to break through is the superficial societal expectation of what you want, what you think you want, right? What people have programmed to give you what you want, right? But like, what do you actually want in life? Like, that's what you really have to come to terms with. And it's not just like, I guarantee you the first thing that anybody answers if they ask themselves what they want is absolutely wrong. 100%.
Right.
100% of the time.
Right.
And it's because of the fact that until we really dive in to even what we believe we are about, you don't know what you want, because you don't know even who you are, really. And most people haven't taken the time to actually consciously and with awareness look at who they fucking are.
Well, could you imagine if society or school, which I'm not a fan of public education. That's another topic. But the point is with that, could you imagine if our schools said to our children, what do you want? What do you want?
Yeah.
Talk about a society that would build a foundation. Because if we know what our foundation is and then we train the fundamentals of our foundation, that is a warrior society. That is a society like, don't you dare. Come, let's go. Yeah. That is come join me. Inspiring.
But that's a functioning society, and we don't want that, right? Like, politicians don't want that. You can see everything. Everything is designed way to fracture us from being a collective, right? If we actually celebrated individuality, like truly did individuality, not the crazy shit that's happening right now with these fucking idiots with some of this other shit. Like, don't even get me started on that. Not that individuality. That's just a lot of that's insane asylum people that are out in the public. But like real individuality of saying like like you said, what you truly want to be, or raising people to embody the strength and passion that it takes to follow their dreams and not take their dreams away from them before they even become freaking teenagers, right? Like to have those dreams and be able to follow through with them. If we were to live that way and be a collective, we would see that our dreams mattered and that everybody around us is a supporting cast member in that attempt to go for that dream, and everybody's supporting one another, because why the fuck not, right?
Right.
But they're like, no. If we leave you to your own devices and you guys start to think that helping each other is a good thing, that's going to be really bad for us. And we need to make sure that you guys hate each other because your skin's different, or because a guy's a man and a woman's a woman, but we want to confuse people of what that is. So we need you to hate each other because some people believe women shouldn't be defined and some people believe women should be defined. And like, it's all this fucking dumb stuff that they're just creating to create a fracture within us so we don't actually support each other.
Yeah.
But, Neil deGrasse Tyson, in my opinion, he said a lot of great things, but one of them was that, obviously we have more in common than we do different. And it's like if we just remembered that, or if we had the ability to have that supersede the psychological warfare that's taking place in the media, like people would be like, why is this even on TV? Like, this is dumb.
Right. Man, dude, you're segueing perfectly into what I want to talk about next. So my brother, all you listeners out there, my brother also hosts a podcast called The Golden Rule Revolution, where, it's about treating people as people and nothing less, right? Because we have more similarities than we do differences when it comes to everyone in this world. So if you're listening to this podcast, you're like, well, dude, I thought I was listening to a hunting podcast. You are, because at the end of what hunting is, the foundation of hunting is to be courageous. It is to be a provider, and providing is more than just meat for your family. It's emotional support. It's intellectual support. It's guidance. It's the umbrella for your family. And so I titled this podcast, I titled our social media, I titled the show on Carbon TV as Soul Seekers, because at the end of the day, it's not just about hunting. Like, I love hunting, but that's not the end all be all, right? I don't have to hunt another day in my life and I can still be fulfilled. It is a tool that supports my journey. It is the something that fans the flame of training my fundamentals. It restores my soul. It renews me, right? It's that if I only focus on defense, then everything else becomes secondary and that gets wasted. It's a renewal, So this idea of soul seekers, okay? So now I'm going to shift into this. When I first started the website, Washington Backcountry, wabackcountry.com, which is now soulseekersnation.com, but you can still get to it from that old address. I had a tagline. This is before I came up with the concept and our slogan, mentorship is conservation.
Yeah.
And that is, I didn't realize like that slogan is beyond hunting. If you want anything to last for generations to come, if you want a better society, if you want better leaders, if you want better men, better women, better husbands, better mothers, better, like whatever, if you want that, then you need to invest in the lives of others. Because when you invest in the lives of others, you can never outgive good. And when you're constantly putting good out into the world, it naturally has a return. We don't know when it returns, but it will at some point. And so this idea of mentorship as conservation ties into soul seekers, in the foundation, the root was, I had this tagline that said, inspiring others to accomplish their dreams, or something to that effect. And so as I'm starting to I take notes throughout my days and write stuff down. I thought about this idea because I always say, oh, it only takes a spark to start a fire, and all of a sudden you're setting the whole world ablaze. It only takes a spark to start a fire for hunting, and then all of a sudden now everyone is voting for legislation within the hunting world, and you got more people promoting it, and now because conservation, the idea is to conserve for future generations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that we have something left for others. So I started writing notes, and I was like, okay, so what does it mean to start a fire in a soul, right? Because if our job, as Mahatma Gandhi said, is to be the change you want to see in the world. So once we light our own fire and we fan our own flame and we train the fundamentals of our own life, we become an
Mm-hmm.
inspiration to others.
Yeah.
And through that inspiration, it is contagious, because when we are training our fundamentals, it automatically builds courage because we're
Mm-hmm.
confident, because confidence and
Right.
courage go together.
Yep.
So we're confident in who we are. We're confident in what we can do. We're confident in how we show up.
Mm-hmm.
And that confidence leads to courage, and courage is contagious. And so
Mm-hmm.
as we start a fire in our own soul, we can also spark it in somebody else's, and then we fan that flame, and that's that mentorship aspect. And then we
Yeah.
let that flame grow. So, just like smiling is contagious, right? Like you see somebody smiling and you
Mm-hmm.
don't smile back, you're not smiling back on purpose.
Yeah.
Like
Very true.
I taught middle school health for the longest time, and I'd have students, and one of my lessons that I do is I just stand there and I'd smile at them. And the grumpiest of grumpy children, like you can't help but not smile. Like you want to hide your eyes from it.
Yeah.
Like that's too much joy. I can't do it. And then they're like, okay, it makes them feel better. So things that are positive in life are contagious. So we want to do that. And this idea of like fan the flame, the fire, you got to let the fire burn. Like, let's go. Well, what does fire represent? Talking about the masculine, it represents safety, but it represents the feminine. It represents warmth.
Mm-hmm.
It represents the masculine in security. And fire also represents vision. Because when we have vision, we're not afraid. And that all stems and ties back into the courage aspect. And, in the Bible, it says the people perish without vision. Without vision, the people perish. Well, we never know how good the light is without having the darkness, right? A sunny day is only as good as when the rain comes and then we miss our sun. So all this tying in together ultimately goes back to, what do you want? How do you want to be? What legacy do you want to leave? How do you want to train your fundamentals of your life to become the man, the leader, the husband, the father, the worker, the employee that you want to be? And that, when we remove the buzz of society, and this is why I love hunting, because you get to places where you remove the buzz of society. It allows us to actually focus and be like, okay, that's what I want.
Yeah.
And there's beauty in that.
Yeah, you're getting back to your ancestral, your primal connection with, Mother Earth. You're getting back to the nature where, forest bathing's a whole thing. Like that's a thing where we can actually receive the energy of, the earth in general and the plants and everything and the animals. It's like that kind of stuff when you're connecting back with that in hunting. And I've heard this from numerous times. I have numerous friends who are hunters, and they all say the same thing that you're saying. And that's one of the beautiful things is like when you're connecting back to that part of yourself, it's almost like a lost piece of our ancestors, right? It's like the life that they got to live, which is why that they were so much more respectful of or better conservationists, for if we want to actually go that route, better conservationists, because they never took more than they needed and they took enough so that they could have the life that they desired to have, right? And then they also respected everything that was around them on top of, their own tribe and everything else. So it's it's coming to terms with that. But yeah, like, how do we want that to look in our lives? And then I love what you said about the flame inside. I listened to part of my meditation in the morning is one of the segments that I have. It's John Hopkins, and it's called like I think it's called like start in the flame or starting the flame or whatever. And in that, he talks about, inside of us we have this, there's ashes, but if you move the ashes away and you see the ember, and this always really stuck with me because it reminded me that no matter where we are in life, no matter how old we think we are or what experiences we've gone to, if life has beaten us down and there's just an ember, that ember can always start the fire again.
Yeah.
Right. And I love that you brought that up, because that fire does, once that fire gets in, you can't help but be confident in yourself. And then you can't help but be courageous once you have that. And so I love that you went down that road, and I love that you use that analogy, because that one, I listen to it every morning, and it always gives me chills, man.
It's special. And that's why I had these thoughts. I was like, I got to do a podcast about it. And you're the perfect guest. And that no coincidence is that we were meant to connect for this. Um, you know, when it comes to being a man and talking about the provider, protector, all this stuff, I had this just idea just now about the term conservation. We talk hunting on this podcast a lot, but if you apply conservation to you as a parent,
Yeah.
or you as a leader, or as you as someone who's impacting other lives or souls around you, do you want to leave the negative traits, or do you want to leave the positive traits? What do you want to pass on? Because as a father to my 3 young boys, I carry a lot of trauma from my family, from my childhood. And I know that I am passing on bad traits at times where I'm like, oh, I don't want to be doing that. And yet it's just like I revert back to yelling. I revert back to rage. I revert back to a man who doesn't know how to communicate calmly
Yeah.
and clearly. And I lose control on my children. And I know that's not healthy. And I start to see them now start to act like that. And I'm like, oh Lord, like I need to be better. I want to be better. So in that moment, I was always told, don't worry about the how, just worry about the what. When you want something bad enough, the how takes care of itself. What do you do in your life to where you feel like you're starting to lose your control and you're
Hmm.
moving away from the fundamentals that you want to maintain? Is it because of training? Is it like you put yourself in scenarios where you train to stay calm, you train to be level-headed, clear-minded? Like, do you understand what
There's
I'm saying right here?
Yeah, there's a combination of things, and I'll give a few kind of responses to this. The first one is like, yes, like what I dealt with in war and what I dealt with in protection has given me a different perspective than a lot of people. So when things are going on around me, like, it has to be like life-threatening chaotic for me to actually ramp up. So like for me, I stay pretty even keel in most things. Um, and even if my wife and I are in an argument, right? For instance, like, even if she hits a nerve where I'm like, oh, that's a little bit of a trigger, I have reframed on my response to that. So I've reframed it, and I've started to instill a new fundamental for me. And the new fundamental for me in that moment is, immediately as I start to feel that, I actually start to breathe in through my nose and out through my mouth to put myself in a parasympathetic state, which happens very fast for me because I do meditation every morning. So that action in and of itself already calms me. So immediately it puts me in a parasympathetic state. So now I can think objectively as to what I want to respond with and what serves me and our relationship in that moment. And so it sounds like a lot, but this all happens in a fraction of a second, where I start to convert to that breath. And then I start to think about, okay, I know if I go this route, this is not going to be productive and is not healthy communication for us. But I know if I stop my ego from wanting to go that route and I go the other route, that we will actually have a better conversation and I won't push her into a place of where we're having a big fight or we're, and it's not, and there's not, it's never not speaking my mind and it's never withholding, things that need to be said. It's strategically saying them in a way that doesn't provoke that person to be in a higher elevated emotional state. And it prevents me from getting to meeting her in her emotional state. Right. So like all of this happens in in fractions of a second, but there's conscious awareness around it. One, because of the fact that yes, I'm not in a life-threatening situation. So to me, I'm like, dude, it doesn't really matter, right, what happens, right? Because I'm not, nobody's dying.
Uh-huh.
And then number two, I'm looking at what's going to be beneficial for our relationship. So those are the two big things for me. And I just remember that. And then the last thing is like, if I say, all right, I want to say this, I'll ask myself internally, what purpose does that serve? And if that purpose isn't to do something beneficial for that conversation or the outcome that I truly want for that conversation, I don't say that shit. So that's really what like that's like that it's like a process I go through, but it's been trained, man. Like, yeah, I fucked up so many times. Don't worry, guys. Everybody listening, I fucked up enough times to have my own like level of high level arguments where I'm like, God, I could have prevented that. But then over time, I constantly beat that fundamental into myself and I kept trying and I kept trying and I would retrospectively evaluate conversations or retrospectively evaluate situations and be like, okay, I could have done this better. And then as I started to give myself a reference point, when that situation came up again, boom, I was able to catch it. And then I was able to work through the process that now is my fundamental process every time I'm in those situations. And so it takes time, it takes repetition, and you're going to suck at first and you're going to definitely screw it up. But guess what? If you keep doing it, you'll eventually not screw it up and you'll be better more times than you are not.
Mm. Mm. Do you carry a lot of trauma from your childhood? Like that you have bad habits of emotional or speaking or do you know what I mean? That because we
Yeah.
fall back on our training, right? The whole idea that you're gonna rise to the occasion is only as good as you
So
falling back
that's
to
false.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
You're
So
gonna fall. You'll fall back to your lowest level of consistent training.
so when it comes to emotional, right?
Yeah.
And we're in uncomfortable situations or tempers are rising or we're being challenged in whatever aspect like and now we haven't even got to the job that I started, which
Yeah.
this ties in, dude. No coincidence. It's a beautiful concept of what we're talking about. um but as you, what trauma do you like have to constantly fight that you don't revert to, right?
Yeah. I mean, I know your background. I know Lucas's background. So mine wasn't obviously nearly in depth as what you guys experienced. But you know, I would say that if I were to relate some form of trauma in my life that I had, yeah, I mean, I had like not necessarily emotionally abusive parents, but definitely like disassociated father, who wasn't necessarily any form of like, uh, you know, he wasn't a guy that was like I was looking up to be like him, right? Like he was confident in certain ways, but it wasn't in like I would say the ways of being a good man, right? And so he wasn't terrible, but he wasn't great either. And those kinds of aspects for me, while it's not like direct trauma, it is when you look at like psychologically how I was raised or how he was showing how to be a man, there was a lot there that had to be undone and then reconfigured, right? And that's where, just like trauma, it's kind of like the same thing. Any of those early days of programming have to be undone. Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about as synaptic pruning, and then they have to be reconstructed to be a better version. But we have to be aware of them at first, right? So
Right.
some of that was those things, and so I wouldn't say that like I was dealing with a lot of trauma from that, but absolutely I was dealing with programming that I would carry and respond in ways like my dad responded, or respond in ways like other people that I followed or looked up to responded. And I'd be like, why the fuck did I do that? Like, what the hell? Like that's not who I am.
Let me jump in if you don't mind real quick. I love
Yeah.
your verbiage because I have within the last like 4 years been trained to talk about trauma, and especially in the education world. It's like, oh man, we're
Yeah.
gonna make trauma based decisions, right? Like trauma, trauma,
Yeah.
trauma. You use the term programmed.
Yeah.
We could even use the word legacy. We could use, there's a lot of words that we could use that we are taking and passing on, or taking and receiving.
Yeah.
And fascinating, just truly fascinating. As simple as that word choice is for you, to me, is mind blowing, right
Yeah.
there, because
Yeah.
words carry power.
Yeah, and programming's a real thing. And like when we look at, you look at like, just think for instance, when your ages 2 to 8, right? Like 2 to 8 is when we're in theta. That's when our brain waves are in theta. So we're easily malleable. This is where hypnosis works, right? So a lot of our programming as who we are as adults, the foundational pieces come in at that age of 2 to 8. A lot of what happens in that time frame affects us as we become adults, but where it's held is the subconscious because it's programmed into our hard drive because we were unconscious when that programming was taking place. And so from there, obviously, there's other things that are built on in later years as we become teenagers and stuff, but those are more conscious decisions to bring things in, or more decisions based on like us having a value for that person that we believe that we need to embody similar traits. But the early years from 2 to 8, you don't have a choice. That's all just being programmed into you. So you can only change that through deep introspection, through shadow work, through trauma, or what I would say like programming work, right? Where you're going back and taking a look at these things and saying like, it may not have been traumatic, but it definitely was programmable. It was definitely not something you chose to have in how you want to be as a human being today, but it was given to you. It wasn't how you wanted to respond to people when you got angry, but it's how you respond to people when you get angry. So like it's all those things. We have the ability to change that, but we got to remember that we got to have a reference point. We got to know what it is.
Dude, you're spitting fire tonight, brother. You're dropping it. You're dropping it hot. I love it.
Appreciate it, brother.
Okay, so you want to know what I'm doing for work?
Yeah, I'd love to know.
So I was like, I'm leaving teaching. I don't want to teach anymore. It was something that I did because I was following my father's footsteps concept. I'm not the man. Like, I want to make my legacy. I want to make my decisions from here on out. Turns out that I'm a very good teacher, and that some things for the time being are just going to be. So I got into mortgages, doing home loans for people at a horrible time where the economy is going to crap, interest rates are going up.
Yeah.
I don't have a community down in Texas of network of people that I can call upon, and so that hasn't been very fruitful. So a man's got to do what a man's got to do to provide for his family. And so I got a teaching job in my local town. But I didn't get any teaching job. I got a teaching job in a school that is a replacement for a juvenile detention center. So
oh, wow.
it's they call it the DAEP, the district alternative educational program. So we have a metal detector, kids wear ankle monitors.
Oh, nice.
There's uniforms. They're not allowed to get out of their seat without raising their hand and being, all that. Like if you there's kids in our program that they still are so bad in our program that the most we can do is quote unquote suspend them, which means they're gone for a day, but then they're back right after that because we're at the final verge. It's jail after this, right?
Yeah.
The kids that get to my program are so far removed from general population that they're closer to jail than they are to returning back to the classroom. Because the general, like 98% of general population might or might not ever have a speeding ticket or
Yeah.
after school detention, right? A referral. But I have the kids that go through referral process, that go through in-school suspension, that go through out-of-school suspension, that go through all of this, and you're closer to jail than you are to returning back to what the general population is.
Wow.
So how does this all tie in together, J-Mac? Well, let me tell you. It has to do with courage. Because ultimately, I have been programmed to be a scared little boy. And that is the overcoming aspect. This is my courage muscle being flexed to be in scenarios where it like gang mentality is at the worst in my building. Right? Like these kids are street raised. A lot of them, the majority of them, their parents are in prison, single parents, no fathers, all this stuff. So why does this all tie together? Why the beauty of this? This is why life is so amazing. Like it's truly amazing. Here I am, a person. I'm a grown ass man. And yet I'm still like leading with this mindset of like scared little boy mentality in a role where I'm dealing with kids and I get flustered. I don't feel like I have the words to say, or I don't know how to handle a situation, or like what do I do? And that fight or flight arises. And we always get what what is the song said? Sometimes you don't always get what you want. You get what you need.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, dude, I was meant to be in this building because what a better way to let my light shine and to sharpen myself and to train my fundamentals of who I am as a human being than to be put in the fire.
Yeah.
And every day I walk in with a smile and I'm just like, golly, I can't believe I'm here.
That's special, brother.
Yeah. And so it all just ties in. This episode, man, is meant to be. The point of that is you have always been an inspiration to me. You know, we can be motivated by a stick or we can be inspired from within. And inspiration, it comes from within, but it helps to be able to identify what we want. And sometimes we need to look out upon the world to say, oh, I want that. I want to go get that. And that means for some, what it means to be a man, or what it means to be a leader, or what it means to learn a skill, an attribute. So you ended up writing a book. You took all this experience that you've had and all this knowledge that you've gained throughout your search for masculinity, and you put it into a book, and you called it Designing the Man Within. Talk about it.
Yeah, brother. I mean, for me, it was just really, it was really about finding a way to resonate with the everyday guy. Like, the first men's movement failed because the everyday man got left behind, which is like 97% of America, right? They got left behind. Well, I didn't want that guy left behind. And then when I started my journey, I got handed a book that was way too esoteric and way too energetic and way too just so far down the spiritual level of like energy that I couldn't resonate with it, and I had no reference point for it. And in that,
is that the hidden spirituality of men?
No, I actually love that book. That was really good by Matthew Fox. This was a different book. It was called The Way of the Superior Man by David Data. And it was just way too far down the path of development. And I wasn't there. And I was like, man, if people are passing this off as like the book to read for guys, like this is bad, because every dude that's going to step foot and say, yeah, I kind of feel like every alpha dude, every blue collar guy that's like, yeah, I feel like things aren't going right. I don't really know what to do. So maybe I'll take a look at some of this other shit out here and see what's going on. If he gets handed that book, he's gonna be like, nope, I'm going back, bro. Peace. Cause like I was like that. I was like, bro, this is terrible. Like I can't resonate with this. It has no reference point for me in my life whatsoever. And so I was like, well, I got into the men's space. I started to educate myself a lot on a lot of the different things from psychological to the sociological background of masculinity and all this stuff, and then started to read a lot of men's books. And I was like, listen, I don't really find one that actually creaks open the door for the everyday man, that shows them that there's somebody out there that actually knows what they're going through, was raised the same way, and has a lot of the same internal conversations and struggles, and then had worked his way through those and is giving tools on how these guys can then apply that to their lives. So I said, hey, I can't complain about it. Like, back to your story of courage, I can't complain about it and fear putting myself out there. I need to actually go and be part of the solution if I don't think it's there. So I did. I wrote the book, and Design the Man Within is curated specifically to help every guy out there just start that journey on what it's like to change your perspective a little bit so you have a better relationship with yourself. You have more of a structured foundation in who you authentically are, and you have a better relationship with the people and the ecosystem around you that you've created. So that's what it's about, bro. That's what it's all for.
Oh my gosh. I'm okay, beautiful. I'm going to tie it into a story of my job today that is very important because you said have a better relationship with yourself. My view of the world is that people don't know themselves. A
Absolutely.
majority of the world, they have no concept of who they are. Therefore, what they stand for, and the domino effect goes from there. So, you ever heard the saying, what's in a name?
Mm-hmm.
I love that. That rang so true today. We have at our school nameplates. And nameplates is a paper saying kid's first name, last name, what school they go to, and what grade they're in.
Mm-hmm.
And this one kid has his nameplate, his name spelt wrong. And he was upset about it. And he just today got a nameplate that has his name spelt correctly. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, dude, I would be pissed if my name wasn't spelt right. And to this day, I get pissed when people don't spell my name correctly. Why? Because I am worth it. I am worth remembering. I am worthy of you knowing how to speak and spell my name properly. It's self-worth. And so I was thinking to myself to this training that I did back in my leadership training where I voted for myself for the very first time. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I've been trained not to vote for myself." We're trained to
Mm.
give, but not to hold on to something for ourselves.
Yeah.
And so in that exercise that we did, we had to stand toe to toe with people in this room, and we were voting for people. You had so many votes that you could give, and if you didn't want to vote for somebody, you had to tell them you weren't voting for them. But in the terminology is you get to live or you don't get to live. And the biggest thing is there's 150 something people in this room that we're having to vote for, and we only have 10 votes. So here I am standing toe to toe with the women, men, older people, younger people, all this stuff. And you had to look them in the eye. And one of the most powerful experiences of my life was to tell somebody or have it be told to me, you're not important enough for me to remember your name. You don't get to live.
Mm.
And that hit me so hard. That as human beings, we are not showing up enough in who we are to leave a legacy of remembrance, that people won't spell our name right, won't speak our name right, or won't even know our name at all.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's not a slap in the face to say, what do you stand for, and why are you going to live today? Because if nothing matters, then nothing matters, then whatever.
Yeah.
But why do you wake up? Why do you get out of bed? And so that whole, what's in a name? Everything is in that name. Everything is in that name because it's the beginning of what you get to stand for and fight for. No, call me my name. Don't call me buddy. Hey, you. What is simple. I called a kid, I said buddy. I always like to say Mr. or Mrs. or Miss. Mr. Mac, will you please turn around, face the wall? Mr. Mac, tuck in your shirt, go back out, knock on the door before you walk in, like all this stuff. Well, I don't know why I said, thanks, buddy. And this kid goes, buddy, that's not my name. And I was like, oh, you're right. It's not. I apologize, Mr. White. Thank you very much. And he fought for his identity and his foundation right there. And I was like, that's cool. That's a beautiful thing.
That was cool.
So,
that's cool.
How can people find your book?
Oh, I appreciate it, brother. And I appreciate you having me on the show. It's always just like fun jamming out with you. You and I could talk for hours. So just super grateful for you and super grateful for your community taking a listen and letting us jam out for a little bit. But everybody can find the book at designthemanwithin.com. It's over there right now. We're doing a special where if you do the ebook, it's 99 cents. And the book will be officially published on May 16th. So everything right now is all pre-order, and you'll get whether you get the hard copy or the ebook, you'll get it on May 16th. But definitely recommend grabbing the ebook if that's what you like getting. And it's pretty much free, bro. Like, may as well just go get it, and then you can read it while you're waiting for the physical book to come in.
I freaking love it. So this is this podcast is going to release on Monday, May 8th, Lord willing, as long as the creek don't rise.
Perfect.
And so the following Tuesday, May 16th, that goes live. So that's awesome. Yeah. And then how can people get a hold of you? If they wanted to sign up for coaching with you or, all that, drop it like it's hot.
Yeah, best way is just go over to johnnyelsasser.com. So it's JOHNNY and then ELSASSER. Go to johnnyelsasser.com. And everything's there. Everything's linked there. So you can find my podcast. You can get to my elite man community if you want to do that. You can reach out to me if you want to do one-on-one coaching. So all that stuff's available over at johnnyelsasser.com. Easiest thing to do is just go there, peruse around, see what you want, and then shoot me a message.
Love it. And I'll make sure I have all those links in the show notes as well so people can click on those. I got to tell you, I'm pissed. I can't. JohnnyMac.com is not available. I've tried. I've looked for it multiple times. So the good stuff. Dude, let me just tell you that I'm honored and humbled to be in community with you. Regardless of how often we speak, that there's a true connection when you can just hop on the phone, pick up dial somebody's name, number, whatever, and you just pick up and you just run. And it's beautiful. You are a man of integrity. You're a gentle, beautiful warrior, poet soul. And I thank you for being who you are, man. Continuing to show up in this world each and every day. It makes a difference.
Appreciate that, brother. It means a lot coming from you, and I feel the same way about you, my friend.
I appreciate it. For all you listening to this podcast, if you're wondering if Johnny hunts, we've been working on getting him lined up to be a mentee on one of our episodes. So hopefully you'll get to see him in, let's say season 5 of Soul Seekers. So what we record in 2024, you're going to be on a hunt with us. Okay, so we got to make sure we get that dialed in.
I will be there.
Then you can just extend your masculinity that much more. And then be like, the art of masculinity as you're just, eating that protein that you harvested yourself. It's a beautiful thing. That. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in this episode. I hope that you took a lot from this. So hopefully you're taking notes because there are some powerful things being shared, a lot of just golden nuggets that you get to hold on to. And one of the things is like it talks in the Bible about bearing your talents versus multiplying it. Don't just take what you learned, write it down or hold on to it and then forget about it. Take what you have, multiply it, practice it, try it out, give it a shot. Why not? Because you never know what's going to happen. Lead with courage. Don't be fearful. And when you find those fearful moments, just know it's an opportunity for growth. Be blessed, everybody. Remember that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure. You can never outgive good, and that hunting truly, truly will transform lives and souls. And so it's your opportunity to fan the flame in your own soul so that you can spark it in others. Be blessed, everybody. I'm Johnny Mac, Johnny Elsasser. Freedom on, and stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast and want to support the show, you can always like, share, subscribe, and leave a rating as it helps us share our mission of mentorship is conservation. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of Soul Seekers Nation as we transform lives through primal adventure. If you want to get more connected with the podcast, check out the Soul Seekers Nation Facebook group as I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. So stay tuned and stay soulful.